to learn how to bring their voices and to learn how to bring the message across, but also it learns them to listen to each other and to understand that one subject has different perspectives, and they learn how to listen to other perspectives and then also to respect other one's perspective. We really encourage and empower young people, the future policymakers, to use their debate skills for advocacy. So actually, debate changing Europe, actually we see them as the pure bridge between those excluded and those in power. And we really see that they have the capacity to debate, they have the knowledge, and now we want to push them to bring those messages to Brussels in a way that policymakers can listen there and can incorporate it in their future policy plans.
Debate Changing Europe marketed ideas' first step to reach out to a student audience and engage the young policymakers of tomorrow, today. What do you think? Join us in debate.
Welcome everybody, also on behalf of my colleague Iris Hirschel and my other colleague Anne Valkering. I'm here to welcome you today. My name is Karen Brummel, I'm one of the organizers of this event today, and we're very honored and very excited to have you all here today. This is a short word of welcome to first introduce both the speakers as well as the group, and then we're going to do a little run through of the format of our debate to quickly start actually the speeches. I'm very happy that we got the speaker panel that we have today already completed. We thought we would have a small change session. Unfortunately, there's two people that weren't here. We've got these four wonderful people with us today. Starting from left to right, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Lucas Vezeli. He is, you may introduce yourself if you'd like to. From the Commission.
Why don't you try?
No, this is too daring. Please, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Lucas Vezeli. I work for Commissioner Laszlo Andor in his cabinet for about 3 years now, and I work on employment policy, macroeconomic policy issues, but also youth employment, and I've been involved in the development of the youth guarantee.
Oh, we're just going.
Let's second, Ms. Marijs Cornelissen. She's a representative
of the European Parliament. I'm in the Green Group in the European Parliament. I'm in the Social Affairs and Employment Committee, as well as in the Foreign Affairs and the Women's Rights Committees. I've been working on the European semester and also closely involved in employment issues, and youth unemployment is of course a huge topic within that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cornelis. Monsieur Savary, s'il vous plaît.
That's such a big thing for me today. So, Mathieu Savary, so I'm a trainee at the European Commission. On top of that, I'm also the president of AEG Brussels, which is the European Students' Forum in English, so that's a way to promote also my association here. At the Commission, I'm working within the DG Employment, so the same as Lukáš, and I'm dealing particularly with the youth unemployment and the youth guarantee, so right now the youth guarantee implementation plans, but also the European Alliance for apprenticeship and the quality framework for traineeships. I think we will have the occasion to get back to the topic throughout the afternoon, but but really thank you that's a big honor for me to be here and to take the floor.
It's great to have you. Thank you for being here. And then finally, our director of the International Debate Education Station in the Netherlands, Yvonne Heesemans.
Yeah, I just introduced myself by the film, but they have asked me to sit behind the table, especially because we also work with young people in disadvantaged area. And of course they also suffer from issues like youth unemployment. So I will especially represent as far as possible, but at least bring in some of the things I have learned when we debated with them in the disadvantaged neighborhoods across the Netherlands and Belgium especially.
Thank you very much, speakers. However, it's not only about you today. Today we mark the final event of an incredibly exciting project called Debate Changing Europe, as the video explained. What today especially is about is our 10 youth representatives who, in their own member states, went to youth, to peer students, and taught them how to debate different perspectives about Europe and about youth employment issues. Therefore, I would like you to click I would like to present to you. Unfortunately, we do not have the time to present everybody personally, but our youth panel here in the front rows, we have asked them today not only to listen to your perspectives, but basically also to challenge you in debate on what they, not only what they think, but also what they took with them from all the voices in Europe they heard in Sweden, Austria, and Germany. Other organizations here today are lovely colleagues from Idea Central, the Open Society Policy Institute, Think Young. We're very excited that you're here also today. Generation Europe Foundation, European Network Against Racism, and Asia Europe. Very welcome. Let us start, because we've got 4 motions to start with. And the first one we would like to introduce is the second movie clip.
Die Jugend ist das Potenzial unserer Zukunft. Wenn man in Jugend investiert, wenn man in Bildung investiert, investiert man auch in die Zukunft.
I would like to invite Mathieu Savary to open the floor on this particular motion.
Yes, thank you, Karen. So first, I didn't mention it, but congrats to the 9 youth representatives that have been through the very harsh selection procedure. So that's an honor to open the debate, and I'm looking forward to hearing your input. So just a few things, a few elements to mention, I think, to tackle the youth guarantee. And because I think it's important to keep them in mind when we deal with the funds and with the policy schemes. So the youth guarantee, first, I think it's important to mention that it's a long-term investment with potential immediate results. So of course it can be seen as a burden for the member states, but the cost, and you can see the study that has been issued last year by the International Labour Organization, the cost of the needs is much higher than the cost of the implementation of such schemes. Second, and this is linked to the first one, the national budgets will be key here. So it's really up to the member states right now to deliver the implementation plans and to give youth guarantee some true experience. The EU action is on the one hand the impetus. So we have been creating this youth guarantee plan. It has been enacted by the Council recommendation, and also the EU action consists in the constant support. So technical assistance, initiatives that goes along the youth guarantee, such as the Quality Framework, European Alliance, and last but not least, because this is what counts in times of crisis, financial support. So on the one hand, you will have the YEI, the Youth Employment Initiative, 6 billion euros, and on the other hand, you will have the European Social Fund. Now, how we divide this money, this is the topic of this motion right now. Is it fair just to tell, okay, the member states with the highest youth unemployment should be the ones to receive the money that is dedicated to the youth guarantee, or should we rather say, okay, the emergency is here in these member states, in these regions, therefore we need to act. So I think this is time for you to take the floor and say, yes, we should do this, or we should rather try to be maybe to divide it in a fairer way in order to respect the sovereignty of the countries.
I invite either José Miguel or Joseph to take the floor.
Oh.
And maybe answer
I'll do that. Yes, all right. Well, thank you, Mr. Savary. I am totally in favor of the idea that the states that are the hardest hit with youth unemployment should benefit the most from this system. I think there's 2 main things why. The first reason is because we really want to prevent a long-term and a culture of unemployment being coming into place in these nations. And second of all, because I have consulted with the Dutch students and who all very much engaged into the debate, but they all agreed that in the Netherlands they don't really feel it as a big issue. So first of all, what we see is that if people are unemployed for a very long time in a certain nation, in a certain area, what often happens is that there is a kind of culture of unemployment. People get used to the fact that they're unemployed. They sometimes parents teach their children not how to get a job, but how to exploit social benefit systems, right? We believe that this is something that is a clear thing that you don't have the moment that the youth unemployment in a certain country is lower, and there's no generic culture of unemployment in this case. And second of all, the Dutch persons who told me what they thought generally agreed that the Netherlands could give a little bit more towards other countries because they are so hard hit, and most of the students felt that they didn't need the protection by this youth guarantee. I do agree there are some issues in the Netherlands, but they all thought they weren't as big to justify that the Netherlands would take a big part in this youth guarantee. And I guess it goes for other rich countries as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you like to respond with me, or Mr. Kai? Would you stand up, please, with speaking? Thank you.
Good afternoon all. Thank you for being with us. I'm from Portugal. I really think that we have to focus I'm in Portugal, it's normal probably, because we are all a little bit selfish, but I think that we really need to focus in the countries with the highest levels of youth unemployment, and probably for two reasons. The first is more moral, because the principle of solidarity, that it's the basis of European Union, and one economic reason, because the biggest countries like Netherlands and like Germany also gains with less youth unemployment in Portugal. Because, for example, one of the consequences of the crisis in Portugal was that the commercial balance is positive now, and one of the reasons is because Portuguese people is buying less cars, and probably less German cars, and probably less Italian cars like Mercedes, Audi, Ferrari, and stuff like that. What I heard with Sofia in Portugal is that the youth in Portugal really thinks that the Portuguese state needs to do something, because the reality is that for the youth in Portugal, European Union is like a very far organization, and we really don't know what it is, the institutions and stuff like that, and we think that the Portuguese state needs to do something with the European Union, of course. But the sensation is that we are creating something like a lost generation that has no hope. And most of the people, it's just normal in Portugal. Okay, I'm in the university, but in the end of the graduation, I won't find a job. And people, especially in areas like history, sociology, it's really hard to get a job. And this leads to an idea that is studying is not necessary, and we are studying for nothing. At the end, we can't reach nothing. And just to end,
do you agree?
I agree.
Based on these,
yes. I agree that countries like Spain, Greece, and Portugal needs to get more attention about European Union, and that's all. We can keep the discussion.
Thank you. Who would like to respond? Would somebody of the panel like to respond at this point? We've heard many different ideas, maybe even an outline of the problem and the non-existent problem from both different sides of Europe. Is there anybody who would take the floor? And maybe anybody who would like to know?
Could I add one more very simple calculation as an argument? That in this same ILO report, it was calculated that 21 billion euros, if I'm correct, were necessary to roll out the youth guarantee throughout the EU. There's 8 billion to be given out. So that naturally means that you need to concentrate the money to make it something worthwhile. And for another one, a country like the Netherlands does still have money of its own to invest in its youth. whereas Spain and Greece and Portugal really don't have that much to spare within their own public budget. So I completely agree that the money that is there should be focused on the countries that are worst hit. Not even actually on the regions that are worst hit, because if a region is within a country that is itself able to pay, there are also quite disadvantaged regions in Germany. I'd say Germany needs to take care of its own disadvantaged regions. It is only in the countries that really have nothing to spare themselves that the money should be targeted, according to me.
Is there somebody who would like to respond? Answer a question, yes.
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's given that it should work that way for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think one thing might be that it could be differently, it could be more effective to invest the money in certain places, not in others. And if we could sort of get more effect out of investing it for like youth, like unemployed people in the richer country, I don't think that necessarily would be a bad idea. And also I think that it's not necessarily true to say that, like, even though we might want to benefit those who are like the weakest, or however you want to define that, I think there could be plenty of such people even within countries that themselves are not necessarily doing so badly. So I think that like tackling youth unemployment is not necessarily an easy thing, and so given that countries that are doing relatively well are able to handle that, and the unemployed youth in those countries, they also have a right to take part of that money. So I don't think it's given necessarily that it should be going only to those countries.
Okay. I can hear you want to respond. Like to.
Well, I had also, of course, spontaneous. You think yes, it should go to the most worse off and the countries. But if you think from out of another geographic perspective and look into, for instance, indeed, just where are the most in need, then it's not only in the countries, it's also in the ghettos, in Paris or in Antwerp or Brussels or wherever. So indeed you can say that a government should take care of its own disadvantaged and unemployed young people, but what are the guarantees that they will do that? And secondly, what are the guarantees that, for instance, in Portugal, the government will invest in the most worst off? So I can imagine a policy in which you highlight the areas in need across Europe, and this also for the future will give support also maybe cross-European cooperation instead of only investing in the countries.
Thank you. May I then broadly ask, going into this line, because we're hardly having a debate here, but if we're advocating that, say, the Germans and the Dutch amongst us, with the lower percentages of youth employment, and as you say, there may be more expertise to be more effective in battling issues. Agreeing then to say, okay, then these countries need to take care of their own, but also, and that's what the motion in front of us says, also invest in other states. Do you think this is feasible, even desirable, to have them both say, hey, look to your own ghettos, look to your own, as far as they are there, look to your own regions, but also invest in others? And why would you do that? Is José Miguel's example of a market leveling itself out enough? Would you?
Thank you. I would first of all congratulate José on the point that she made at the very beginning, which is that also the countries which have the best economic and employment performance at the moment, like countries in the core of the European Union, of the Eurozone, they also would benefit from reducing youth unemployment in the countries which suffer from the highest levels. I think this is a very important point, and it is therefore in their self-interest to tackle the problem. It is in the collective interest of the European Union, and especially of the countries which committed themselves to having the single currency, to tackle the key employment and social problems. As you mentioned, if there are hundreds of thousands of young unemployed in Southern Europe, they are not buying products from the rest of the European single market, and everybody loses. So I think that's a very important point. I think we also all broadly agree that yes, the attention and support needs to be concentrated there where the problem is biggest. Somewhere it's the whole member state is in trouble. Spain, Greece, somewhere it's more graduated. Northern Portugal has less of a trouble than Southern Portugal. Somewhere the discrepancies are even larger. In the UK, you have for example Inner London, which is a high which is a lot of youth unemployment. You have Merseyside, the Liverpool area, and Manchester. There is also a lot of youth unemployment there. In other regions, it's less of a problem. And then even you have even really micro regions like the outskirts of Paris, which Yvonne mentioned. So of course the level of where you have to tackle the problem is it's a bit difficult to define across the continent. Somewhere the whole country is burning. Somewhere it's a region that is burning. Somewhere it's a sub-region that is burning. So if we consider what actually happened when the European Council agreed that on allocating 6 billion of funding, actually 3 new billion and 3 billion from old money, to allocate to target the problem of youth unemployment, they decided to allocate it on a regional basis. For regions where the youth unemployment rate exceeds 25%, which this is in the end how the money was allocated. I think it's a sensible method. There were of course many discussions on whether the threshold should go a bit up, a bit down. Of course, there are countries like Spain or Greece where every single region qualifies practically, so there you get the whole country covered through this criteria. In some other countries, like the UK, for example, you get 5 regions out of dozens of regions that qualify, but they also receive some support. So I think somehow with of course some flexibility inbuilt in the mechanism, we arrive at a solution where the money actually goes to those places where support is most needed.
Would you do that? I think also the UK should be paying itself.
We of course try to make all countries invest. This is also why the Youth Guarantee was launched, and all member states have committed to this. It is not a very firm commitment because there's no sanction if they don't do it, but at least every single member state has said we will introduce the Youth Guarantee. Then it comes to the matter of who pays for the introduction of it. And there's some countries that cannot pay for that themselves, and there's countries that can. In the end, it was regionally divided, which is a fairly normal way of dividing European funds. But yeah, if it had been up to me, it would be more of a national thing, because yes, the UK can pay for its own youth guarantee, and no, Greece cannot. And just one reaction, if you say, well, but what if a member state does not pay for it? But then you reach a very core issue of the EU. The EU is not there to compensate for wrong choices of national governments. If governments make wrong choices, then basically they need to be voted out of office in the next elections. But it sort of goes against the whole way that politics is organised within the EU. If you say, well, we need to bypass national governments if they don't make the right choices and organise it in a European way, we need to organise Europeanly what needs to be organised Europeanly, and just take decisions at the level at which they should be taken to, in the end, benefit the whole, because that, I think, is a very important point. We're all in this ship together. Barroso said at one point, well, it's like some of the countries on one side of the boat are saying to some others, your side of the boat is sinking, but yeah, we are all in the same boat together.
Thank you. Would you start, please?
Yeah. Hey, I think that's basically part of the problem. Some people want to leave the boat. Namely, the UK wants to leave the boat, and they are voting on actually the very question if they want to leave the boat. And UKIP is getting stronger and stronger. We can assume that Eurosceptic parties will have in the next election over 20%. If it's getting worse, then maybe close to 30%. And if we're talking about that, then public perception is important. And then the opinion of the northeast of the UK does matter. And if we then say, yeah, some specific countries get the money from other countries, it's way harder to justify it to the true Finns, to the UKIPs in the world, while we are giving that. If we have actually something that at least is perceived as a neutral threshold of unemployment, then you can argue we have this problem here, we have this problem in various states. It doesn't really matter if it's more effective or not, but it's perceived as more just. And sometimes if things are perceived as more just, then it's more easily justifiable for pro-European parties. Then we can say this is a whole European thing and not just a European thing to help those actually who are partly responsible for what happened. But you, for example, you were saying that it's not the idea of the European Union to bail out countries who actually make mistakes, but that's how it's perceived in some countries. It doesn't really matter if it's true, but it's perceived as this. And if we are talking about the idea that Europe is funded on solidarity, for most of the people that doesn't, it's not true. Firstly, it wasn't funded on solidarity, it was funded on actually trade. Yeah. And we believe at the end of the day that for some people solidarity doesn't matter. It more matters that you can sell stuff, which I take as an argument, but I could sell stuff in the UK as well, right?
I never said that the EU is not there to bail out countries that made mistakes. It has and it should. But if there is a government, well, if the Dutch government, for instance, chooses within its policy choices not to invest in alleviating youth unemployment, then yeah, that is a choice of a democratically elected government, and they should really be voted out of office in the next elections. I mean, that is the way to handle that. That's something entirely different than a country that makes mistakes, cooks the books, and ends up bankrupt. Then, sure, yeah, that's something we need to salvage.
Thank you. May I give the floor before closing statements of Mr. Savary, or would you like to interrupt?
That's fine.
Yes.
Let's remember that okay, youth employment, youth guarantee, these are matters of employment policy. If you look at the treaty, this is something where the EU cannot harmonize measures, so we could not possibly prescribe at the EU level the youth guarantee as in the form of a regulation directive. It's a recommendation, and it's something that it's a matter of coordinated employment policy. The member states all agreed on the recommendation, which I've printed on handouts, and I think it's somewhere in the back of the room. You can have a look at it. It's only 6 pages. And they agreed on this recommendation. Hey, this is something that we all should do, and if we all do it, it will actually benefit all of us together. And I agree that certainly a government which decides not to care at all about its young unemployed should be voted out of office. But it's also important that when the Minister for Labour and Social Affairs, Minister of Employment, comes to Brussels for the Council meeting a couple of times per year, that he or she is facing some peer pressure from the other countries saying, why aren't you putting in place the youth guarantee, or why aren't you doing anything at all, or why are you doing just very modest, why are you taking just very modest steps in this respect? Why are you letting your young people down, but why are you letting everybody else in the single market down? Because you are really undermining the long-term potential of the whole single market and of the Eurozone in particular by failing to do your homework on the youth guarantee.
Some interesting questions also that may come back soon in the next motion. Mathieu, may I ask you
to close the debate? That's a bit frustrating because in the end the debate has been sparked off a bit lately with this final quotation of Mrs. Collinson. The EU is not here to compensate wrong decisions made at the national level. Well, I would say that the EU is here to support and to help the change within the countries, and instead of giving the last push to the UK out of the boat, we should be here to provide the incentives for a genuine change at the EU level, because as Lukas just said, the consequences of youth employment in the countries are repercuted everywhere in Europe. So that's why we should tackle this issue comprehensively and Europe-wide. One last thing that I would like to say about the youth guarantee, and maybe that's quite my answer to the question, is that the youth guarantee is not only about supporting youth employment, it's also about prevention of youth unemployment. And when you look at the countries, it's not only a regions divide, it's also a divide within their own regions, because you've got some specific target groups that are much more affected than the rest. One that is quite obvious for everyone is the Roma people, of course. Also, you've got the needs. We didn't tackle this issue, and that's, I hope that it will come up a bit later on, but the needs are particularly affected. One of the solutions that could be provided in the frame of the EU funds would be the specific operational programs in ESF in all regions. and of course, myself working in the youth and employment unit, I hope that we will have as many specific operational programs all over Europe as possible. And I will stop here because I think that's enough.
Good. This was our first motion. Okay, I think we're warm. I think we're getting into it. Thank you very much. Let me give the floor to my colleague Anne to guide you through the second motion.
We know unemployment is a big issue among many Europeans and many young Europeans.
We know that this problem will not easily be solved. So,
in my opinion, it's really important that they invest in the youth because we are most likely the future of the whole European Union.
All right, so many of you indicated that when we are, I am going to move here. When we are giving aid to young people who cannot find a job easily, and when we help them through the youth initiative or youth guarantee, we should focus on things that actually directly serve society rather than just give them a job in a company or an internship in a company or have them build up work experience in some way. And that is the second motion of this debate. And I would like to invite Ms. Cornelissen to give a statement about this motion.
Yeah, I must admit that I didn't entirely understand the motion. Is it that it should be social services that carry out the projects, and so that it's more or less government-led or authorities-led, or is something else meant?
The way I interpreted it is that it would be government-led programs that are. I need to move. I will move.
Can we pull?
All right. Sorry. But now I'm blocking the banner. All right. So anyway, the idea is that it's government-led projects that would be, for example, helping in areas of, that the government needs to have happen anyway. So for example, say in a nursing home where it's very useful work, or say cleaning the streets. I'm giving very easy examples now, but obviously there are more jobs available.
So
but it would definitely
it's more
be
about the social character of the jobs. Yeah.
the direct benefit to society kind of jobs, but definitely government led as well.
To help understand, kids in the training sessions came up with ideas like making a European civil service army. So it's not only on the national government level, but maybe even on the EU level. It's a very broad way of describing, hey, let's put in some extra infrastructural projects, some healthcare issues, and do it in...
Okay. Oh, actually, I live in Amsterdam in the weekends. There's the Amsterdam Forest, it's called, and that was built in 1924, I think, at the very, very beginning of the crisis. And that was such a project in which a lot of unemployed people were put to work building this forest. It's a lovely forest. Well, on a small scale, I wouldn't think that perhaps every city needs its own forest built by young people. Would go a bit too far. The youth guarantee, it's something that all countries are committed to. They should take all kinds of actions. And there is no holy grail of solving youth unemployment. There is no one solution that will work. I think that, the one solution that will work is actually getting out of the crisis. Because, I do want to make this point that it is all about having an economic crisis and a shortage of jobs in general. So the only real solution is getting out of the crisis and having the economy start growing again and fostering jobs again.
But barring that, and this is what he's working on as well, trying to make social governance or economic governance more social, because for now, with countries only trying to get under the 3% budget deficit and the 60% state debt, they're reforming in a way that might be good for the financial figures. But that does make poverty rise, and that does make unemployment rise even further. And if it were up to me, then levels of unemployment and poverty would be as binding as would the 3% and the 60%. But so that is the bigger framework within which you should see the battle against youth unemployment. For the youth guarantee, of course, is a framework that needs to be filled in with activities. And I think that it would be brilliant to have a lot of activities together with companies, with businesses, to have, for instance, business startup possibilities, helping young people get credit with banks to start up their own businesses and create their own jobs that way. There's now in the Netherlands this project of the Starters Scholarship, where you get the chance to work for half a year and get a scholarship, so it's cheap for the employer, but you gain experience and you also gain sort of a little bit of money to be able to do a course or get a certificate or whatever after. This has become hugely popular in the Netherlands in a very short time. I think there's about 200 municipalities participating now. There's all kinds of wonderful things sprouting up throughout the EU. I love the Danish job patrol, where young people go by employers who employ young people to do peer interviews with young people to see whether their employee rights are being respected. And this works wonders. And I thought at first it would be sort of a symbolic project, but they visited 100,000 companies this summer, so it's not a small thing at all. There's examples of government-led projects, there's examples of business projects, there's projects that are being done by banks, and I think we need all of them to also be able to cater for very different groups of young people with different education levels, different places where they live, different areas, and so it needs to be coming from a multitude of different options.
So in general, social service projects should not be the main focus of such a youth guarantee because of the reasons you gave about diversity. Now I'd like to ask the two, I did notice where you were, the two people who prepared this motion, Johan and Madeline. I don't know who's starting.
I'm starting.
All right, please rise.
Well, we have certain aspects to that motion, and some were brought up already by you. But first aspect is that we had a problem with the skill match, or mismatch, what we discussed earlier today. So we have actually a demand of ICT jobs, white jobs, green jobs, and then we propose social services, and then we ask the question, is that the right area to incentivize more jobs? So we had the first problem with that because it's a question, do we, like, in terms of getting out of the crisis and fostering economy rise, is that the right area? Is that the right field of where's the most potential for the economic for the economy to rise again? So that was the first problem we had with that issue. The second one is basically the decline of the prestige and also the value of earnings in that position, because I mean we were told that we should present some aspects of our own country, and I'm from Germany and of the Austrian society. So what happened basically in Germany when we implemented Hartz IV like a couple years ago, that we got into those social services and unemployed people were asked to work very cheaply in those areas. So like public gardening, doing some working in hospitals and stuff like that. So first of all, those jobs got, you know, less prestige. All of a sudden, were not paid very well. Was basically paid by the state, just and not really seen as a real job because you were still unemployed but working. So basically, like government slave. And so this is which led to a big social gap and a big class society. So now all of a sudden we have like this class of people who have like low income jobs, and now a class of people which are very well, you know, earned jobs. And I don't think that's the goal what the European Union wants to achieve. So that's a big fear I see with that issue. And I know it's a question of how is it implemented, but that would be my concern. If we implement something like that, that should be well-paid jobs, and they would still have to be recognized as real jobs and get paid as a normal job and not €1 jobs.
All right. Do you have like 20 seconds more or a whole minute more?
Yeah, 20 seconds more. Then also the problem is the voluntarily social year, which is actually implementation. I would see that actually quite suitable. Because, for example, in Germany, we just recently voted against military duty, and when male young people said, okay, we don't want to do the military service, I'm going to do social service. So those were a lot of jobs, like in terms of hospitals and kindergartens. Those jobs fell apart with that new policy. Those are perfectly jobs which are now open as a voluntary year to say, okay, we have still the demand for those jobs, and this would be a good implementation to offer a good education, but implemented with like an educational feel to it, so that they actually learn something valuable to that job, and not just used as slaves, because that's, you know, the whole idea that those people get work experience. And just 15 more seconds, because I promised, I mean, we did the pupils, we debated a lot with the pupils, and I promised them to tell them what they thought about the whole unemployment situation. And because the biggest solution they saw definitely in an apprenticeship for the whole European Union, not just Austria and Germany, and also startups. And you, Ms. Cornelissen, was already talking about, so okay, I'm done.
So again, the focus on let's diversify, let's not devalue certain jobs by making them cheap and available through almost forced labor or fake forced labor. Johan, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah. So in a lot of the debate we focused when we spoke about these issues in Sweden, the way to solve it, we talked a lot about education and sort of like the government going in and making sure that people are well educated for the jobs that sort of where they demand people. So I just want to address this mismatch point, because one of the main concerns with allowing the sort of incentives given to companies to hire interns and that kind of thing is the concern for exploitation, and that was brought up and has been brought up a lot in the debates in Sweden, and that's why we are more in favor of having sort of government-led programs, and we believe that government programs can be good in itself, and I'll get to that. But the point about exploitation here is that if you're doing it for the government can create a job specifically for that. Like they can say, all right, we'll have extra people in this sector, which will be filled by these vacancies. But in the private sector, you can't as easily see that. For example, in the private sector, they might fill jobs that already exist, but they just take cheap labor to fill them. And so instead of having, you know, they'll fire the person paid a decent salary and then take in with the aid of government to just, you know, fill their profit line. And that has been one of the major arguing points in Sweden. And we also believe that the reason the problem with this is that there is no real accountants here. It's hard to check up on companies to see if they're doing this or if they're actually employing more people, employing more youths. And also, based on this, there's also the idea of perception, because a lot of people see that the financial crisis isn't necessarily something that harms everyone, but in fact something that benefits, you know, the big corporations that are making a lot of money now that, for example, employment is cheap. This is a perception that is quite harmful and that is not good to have. And we believe that any sort of idea that these incentivized programs help the sort of corporations that some people feel cause the crisis or cause this harm, we believe that that is also a harmful image of the program in itself. We We believe that instead, if you focus on, well, if you focus on government programs, you can fill out sectors that have been cut down, for example, in healthcare in these areas. But also in general, when you cut down programs, you usually don't cut down the skilled people. Like if you cut down on how much you spend on police force, you don't cut down the amount of police officers, you just cut down, for example, administrative personnel and that stuff, and have police officers write more reports. And these kind of unskilled laborers have to do that as well. We believe that necessarily the prestige of these jobs don't emanate from the amount of pay you get, but from they can get it from like the service to society. So not necessarily planning force and giving leaves, but there could be jobs that are not require too much skill, but that still sort of puts you in there and puts you sort of in a working environment that gives you that type of education, that sort of hands down skills to get you a job in the future. But if you necessarily need, and I'm summarizing now, if you, and that's to fill out those types of jobs. There are other types of jobs we want to fill when it comes to sort of ICT, green jobs. That the role of that was clearly when we debated in Sweden was do it through education, and that is also government run. So that's how we say that the services should mainly be through social state-run government projects.
All right. Okay. Would you want to respond? Would anyone else want to respond?
Brilliant argumentation. Really good. Yeah. He whispered in my ear, she's ready to debate in the European Parliament now, and I agree. Yes, no, some very, very good arguments have been mentioned. I think definitely the danger of replacement is a very, very valid one. Both in the German example, I think we have that in the Netherlands as well, where municipal gardeners were let go because of cuts in the budget. And then these same unemployed municipal gardeners were sort of forced to do the jobs they once did in return for getting their benefits, which, I mean, it's just so horrible. So that definitely should be prevented. I'm very happy to know that the European Commission will be coming out with a framework for apprenticeships, to try to at least have some safeguard against exploitation of young people, because yeah, with so many people just wanting a job and begging for one, it is so easy to exploit them, especially people who don't have that much experience negotiating in the labour market. And yeah, I'm also very happy to hear that Germany will finally have a minimum wage at some point, so that these mini jobs of €2.50 an hour will be passed. I mean, that is still white slavery exploitation.
So before we move on to you, I would like to give the floor to you.
I'm Miguel from Europe, and I would like to say I'm against this motion, because for me it means that it's one size fits all. You find an easy solution for the governments. You even like cover some of your problems, or you can even build more roads cheaply. And at the same time, you are not paying attention to the real needs of every individual. And for me, the youth guarantee will only work if it pays attention to the individual needs of everyone, because it's not the same. I mean, they are all unemployed people, but it's not the same. Every people, if it's finished higher education, or it just came out of secondary education. So it should be more focused on case by case, and then of course you cannot cover all with social service projects, because it will mean, of course, you will give out a job for 6 months, and then after that, what's come? What if you are an engineer and you have been doing gardening in the city? After 6 months, you are not going to continue that. You will start looking again for a job in a field. So for me, these social service projects can be a temporary solution, and I don't see the youth guarantee as something like that, but as something that really is the first step to become a real employed person in the job market for a long term.
So we shouldn't waste it on this particular Yvonne?
Oh, okay.
Just a short interjection. It's 4:30.
Yeah, we do realize that. There's,
okay, this is my time.
Oh, you don't get to wrap it up then. But
No, but I'm sure that the other speaker will be more than capable of doing so. Thank you
so much. That was very inspiring, and yeah, I wish you very good luck with your projects. Yeah, hope that the Youth Guarantee and all the initiatives will be put to very, very good use in the European Union.
Thank you. I'm then going to invite you to thank you also on our behalf as a little of mine. Little thank you from us. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a shame you have to leave because it's very interesting to have you. Maybe until next time with an idea again. We're in Amsterdam also.
Oh, we can all go to the forest then.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just getting my phone out of the electricity here.
Nice.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Bye.
All right, Yvonne?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a pity that she's not there anymore. She was our reference point, but anyway. No, I believe indeed, I agree, of course, not of course, but that if it happens, the social service project needs to be empowering for the people who are participating in it. And also, of course, yeah, that they grow through it, that's my belief. But having said that, I think it's a very short-term solution. And if we focus on the motion, I'm actually especially focusing on the word mainly. And I think this is not the main job of the Youth Guarantee program, I believe. And then I talk about the Netherlands in particular, but I think in every country they do to have their homework and figuring out how are we coordinating actually the prevention of the people entering into a youth unemployment situation. In our country, for instance, there are totally two split domains, the social services, the labour market and the educational sector, and it is absolutely shocking how this is matching each other. Just give one example. We have so what I told you, we have the debate with these kids who are unemployed, dropped out from lower educational school. Why? Because they have to find their own internship. And if they don't have an internship found, then they cannot get their exam. So that's in the Netherlands.
It's the same in France.
The same in France. Well, so I think there's a first start to figure out how can you at least help these young kids, and massively have a complaint about this, that at least they get their starter's qualification. Because then you come to the second point, if they don't have a diploma, nobody is seeing them, they are lost. But they have a lot of competence. So there are many other ways and policies to be implemented, giving even those who don't have a starter's qualification opportunities on the labour market. So I wouldn't say immediately talking about social service programs.
All right, and I will give you a chance to wrap up this debate as well, so you get to wrap up too. But before that, I'd like to see if there's anyone who would want to make a brief statement, and if not, then we're moving to you, and you get to wrap up this debate.
The one to deal with the closing procedure of every motion.
Well, these two.
Just 3 points shortly. First one is I completely agree with the point raised by Johan. The problem with the private sector is the vacancies that are filled in with with cheap labor force, and that's something that is really a big concern for the Commission. That's why the European Alliance has been launched for apprenticeship. That's why the QFT, the Quality Framework for Traineeships, has been enacted too. And
the Commission will make a proposal tomorrow.
Exactly, and that's what I was about to say. This is the good news of the day. We just got to know that it has been accepted by within the internal consultation process. But the problem is that if you put on the one hand the private sector and on the other hand the public sector, it's also huge resources for youth employment that you are just avoiding. For instance, just in the frame of the European Alliance for Apprenticeship, we've got Nestlé that has committed to create more than 10,000 apprenticeships by the end of 2015. And another good consequence of that is, like, by describing this measure to the supply chain, then many of the actors in the supply chain committed to create, I don't know, 100 apprenticeship places here, to 100 here, and at the end of the day you can end up with 30,000 new apprenticeship places by the end of 2015, which is something very, very important and valuable to fight youth unemployment. Second thing, very quickly, and I think that will give the answer to this question, my answer at least, is the youth guarantee. It's aimed at short-term measures, of course, but it's also aiming at structural reforms of the labor market and the education system, and that's why we should rest upon the dual learning system that is working well in Austria and Germany, and that in the frame of the European Alliance, for instance, as a platform, we should exchange practices to say, look, we're facing the same problem in this region. Why don't you do that and that and that? Because it worked out to get more apprenticeship and to increase and to improve the image of apprenticeship. Last thing, very important, to echo the second point, is about the skills mismatch. To make sure that all the vacancies are filled in, and to make sure that we have good quality apprenticeship and traineeship, you need learning outcomes that has been agreed upon at the beginning of the apprenticeship or the training. Learning outcomes, that's the key, and then that's the best way to address the skills mismatch.
Thank you very much. I think we can safely conclude that there will be no European civil service army after this debate. And with that, I'd like to move on to the next motion.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is certainly interesting, and some of the next points for the next motion already came to the table. But let me bore you with a small anecdote. The sessions, training sessions, they have been not only about youth employment issues and gathering youth opinions, but obviously they've also been a small, very general crash course about the EU. And then we asked youth, they asked youth, how they would effectively lobby the EU. One of the most interesting feedback that we got, next to all the press bulletins, all the websites and statements that would be written to Brussels, was to go to Brussels, lock President Schulz up in a bathroom until he wanted to hear what they had to say. We're not going to do that today, so following that anecdote, let's go to the third motion.
I think there are different kinds of things which should be done, like for example,
we should invest in the working experience of people.
Youth guarantee funding should be accompanied by strict rules and regulations in the market to minimize potentially negative economic effects caused by subsidies. A long motion that was inspired by two different ideas on the table. One very loud argument for experience, as we were just closing the second motion on that note. Please provide us the opportunity for experience, and we have an opportunity in the labour market. On the other hand, what are you going to do with issues of exploitation, possible unevenness in labour markets? Mr. Vasily, you've prepared an opening statement here. Give it a floor.
Well, it very much links to the previous motion and to the question whether we could possibly employ all the young unemployed in social services, or whether we could possibly all employ them in ICT jobs, or what to do with them. I think what we need to realize is that the youth guarantee is an investment. It's something that governments need to do, and they need to manage it at their national level. And in the end, it also needs to be implemented with the involvement of the regional and local authorities. But it's an investment, and they need to allocate people to the right measures, and they need to find the right means of support to the people depending on their needs. So if you have a talented software programmer who finished education but cannot find a job, well, you don't put him possibly into planting trees in a park. You try to find him or her some work which is relevant to their background, so that they can further develop. And there is a number of potential little measures that the governments, or instruments that the governments can use. They can use hiring subsidies, yes. They can finance trainings. They can provide traineeship or apprenticeship grants. They can provide grants for business startup. So there is a number of them. And yes, indeed, they need to develop criteria at the national level or maybe at the regional level or the city level on how exactly they are going to use the money that they have available to help the people in the best way and to avoid negative effects like just throwing money where it's not needed and providing support where the people would have helped themselves. But certainly this is not something that we could fix at the EU level. So this is also why if you look at the Council recommendation on the Youth Guarantee, you see that it lists a number of possible measures that I mentioned: hiring subsidies, startup grants, financing of trainings, apprenticeship grants or traineeship grants. But it's basically the cocktail needs to be mixed at the national level or even maybe at lower levels, where the actual support is provided. So the job center or whatever is the main contact point for the young job seeker should be able to decide. Okay, you need to be placed into a traineeship. This will help you, and we have a company that will have an opening for you. While on the contrary, another person will be maybe placed into a traineeship in a public-owned hospital. So it's impossible to harmonize this at the EU level, certainly because the situation throughout Europe is so diverse. But certainly whoever is involved in the implementation of the Youth Guarantee, starting from the national ministry to the regional government or to the municipal council or the local job center, they need to of course think about how to maximize the return on investment and what exact instrument to use towards every young person that comes to ask for their help.
Okay, thank you. May I give the floor to Ida and Lotte to see whether she thinks and whether it's yes. Yes, you may. I can. Yes.
Thank you. Well, we have a little bit of a problem with the rules and regulations because when you put them on the companies, you push the companies too much and they won't take any trainees anymore. Because when there are too much rules, it's too complicated and well, yeah, it's too complicated then. And then it's about traineeships. But these trainees work for 40 hours a week or more, and they don't get the same loan as the employees. So that's a big problem because only because they're younger and they're unexperienced, they get a lower loan. But the traineeship is used to teach young people to get a job and how you do it. So that's a pretty big problem. And especially in the Netherlands, you see now that young people, they have a bachelor, 2 master degrees, and they hop from traineeship to traineeship because they're cheap companies. They're smart, cheap, easy to get because there are a lot of people who want traineeship. So they're hopping from traineeship to traineeship and don't get any job because they're young and unexperienced. So that's a little bit it.
Okay, so how are you going to prevent, how are you going to get people a real opportunity? Thank you very much. I think maybe Emil would like to respond. Thank you very much.
Response or continuation.
Or continuation.
Parallel sign. The idea of creating rules and regulations in the market to minimize the economic effects. Every time you create a traineeship, you are creating a crowding out effect. You are creating an opportunity for a company or whatever it is that is running this traineeship to not hire someone, to instead use a traineeship. And it has become, you have seen signs in many countries, Sweden among them, that companies have started to institutionalize and make it into a sort of practice to hire trainees for this short period of time for menial tasks, menial labor, to get a cheaper labor market. And that's what we sort of discussed earlier. And I really think that if there are to be any type of rules, any type of regulations, they really need to promote actually hiring people for a job, not a traineeship. The young people deserve a job. The older generations fought long and hard to create a society where they sort of get a secure feeling in their own employment. It's a secure feeling to create something and to advance at the position they're in. I think the youth deserve the same.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to respond to these two topics? Maybe you would like to directly respond to them? It's correct. Is everybody still awake? May I then ask you? Oh, yes, Gustav.
I just think that like one thing that needs to be kept in mind sometimes is that when you talk about creating jobs and like crowding out effects, I mean, jobs can be created quite easily in the sense that like it's not a static mass of jobs that's just there. So it depends a lot on like if we create an opportunity to employ someone, that job doesn't necessarily compete with existing jobs. That depends a lot on the nature of the jobs. I guess linking to the previous discussion, one of the arguments you could bring to why you would want to have public sort of jobs instead of private jobs in this kind of program is the fact that they definitely don't necessarily crowd out existing jobs if you don't want them to. If you hire people to do jobs, for example, that don't exist in the present, like if we have, I don't know, things like changing the sheets more often in homes for the elderly, but if that's, you know, a job that doesn't exist currently, if you only do it like every second day and you start doing it every day or something, then that doesn't really compete with the existing job because no one's doing it currently. So I think there are ways of getting around these kind of problems.
Okay. Well, flagging these kinds of problems, may I ask then, and from the statement you put forward that it's all on the national level and all about finding the right mix. To me, it sounds like a pretty complicated, possibly very bureaucratic way to figure out how to best interfere in what we want to be a labour market that's as free as possible and as efficient as possible. How do these remarks balance with spending it on education and trying through better suitable education to get the experience through there, so that paper qualifications are enough to get that job at the right level without having to interfere with the job market?
Let me just to clarify.
Is that a fair question?
Look, the youth guarantee it's not a simple, it's not a narrow measure. It's about creating a comprehensive scheme that catches everyone under 25, ensures that they get the labor market opportunity, at least one. And it can be a job opportunity, it can be a traineeship, it can be an apprenticeship, it can be a further learning experience, training course, what have you. Depending on the needs of the individual, and depending on also what companies and NGOs or public sector institutions in the area have been able to offer as placements. So you need to customize it actually for the individual concerned. Just read the paragraph 1 of the Council recommendation. Member States should ensure that all young people under the age of 25 years receive a good quality offer of employment, continued education, an apprenticeship or a traineeship within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed or leaving formal education. There is no one size fits all. Like, okay, let's move them all to plant the municipal park, or let's move them all into centers for the elderly to help there. No, you would not be able to employ them there. First of all, you would not use the individual young people's potential, and you would not help them develop their skills. And you would not really help them in improving the transition from school to work, which is what really matters. The Youth Guarantee is all about improving the transition from school to work. Now, but it's a very valid point that both of you guys from Sweden are making, that about the displacement of regular jobs through apprenticeship. Now, tomorrow, when the European Commission puts forward the proposal, again for a Council recommendation, no legislation, right? Not the directive, not the regulation, but Council recommendation on the quality framework for traineeships, whereby we would try to create consensus in Europe of what makes a good traineeship. One of the elements is a traineeship must not displace a regular job. And this is something we will not be able to take companies to court on that basis, that and pursue any penalties for them. But you as a trainee or you trade unions within the company should be able to also invoke this and say, hey, this is some kind of a soft standard in Europe. A traineeship should serve as a learning experience. It should not be probably longer than 6 or similar number of months, and it should not displace an existing job. And if it does, then something is wrong in the company, and the company is abusing the trainee. So this is something. It will be a soft standard. It will not be legally enforceable, but it's nonetheless something that people can invoke in the discussions within companies, or also vis-a-vis their national government. And if governments are using public money in order to subsidize traineeships on a permanent basis and helping companies to basically bring down labor costs, if people consider this is not fair, then they really need to make their voice heard also vis-à-vis the national government or vis-à-vis whoever is deciding on the use of the money and actually authorizing those subsidies at the national, regional, local level.
I can see somebody who may like to respond.
Yeah.
Would you stand up, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The idea of a soft standard is pretty nice, but the problem with soft standards and the idea that they might be enforced through bargaining positions by trade unions, so actually that you assume that trade unions are strong enough and that trade unions are apparent everywhere. When we are talking especially about young unemployed, then we are talking about interns. Interns are not present in most of the trading unions. So if you look at the people you want to represent, they have no representation. So it doesn't really work, your idea of a perfect bargaining and then there is something wrong in the company. Yeah, there is something wrong in the company, but the actor who actually should change that is not willing to do it because he can still protect his own, his own constituents, and the people who need to be protected are not. So a soft standard won't really work. It won't really work for new jobs, and it might even happen, and we saw that in a couple of examples, and we named all of them. We named nearly all the countries in Northern Europe, so probably a soft standard is not enough, right?
Thank you. Emil,
Yeah, just the whole thing of saying there's something wrong with a company. If their company gets an opportunity to hire a trainee to do the job of someone who would actually be hired, they increase their profit. And that's sort of the point of a company, to produce profit. So I don't really see how we want to encourage companies to do a morally correct choice, because they are out after profit. That is the company's sort of job.
But what can the government do? Let's say as the government we might agree on the fact that the government should avoid providing a traineeship subsidy if it's just a traineeship and if there is no prospect of them staying on with the company. And if so to the extent that the government provides hiring subsidies, it should be for people who get an open-ended contract. Fair enough. But the general trend that companies tend to sometimes displace regular workers with trainees, this is much more difficult for governments to tackle because this simply results from the weakness of the labor market, from high unemployment. And I agree, it's horrible as an experience for young people that they have to hop from one traineeship to another. But this is simply, the labor market has unfortunately gone through a development where the bargaining position of young people in the labor market has become a lot weaker. Trade unions are also going through a generational change. They are getting older and older. They are not always succeeding in actually, or they are sometimes maybe not open. I don't know, but definitely they are not getting younger on average. And the issue of to what extent they represent young people is a real one. Depends on sectors. In some sectors, you practically don't have trade unions, like software development, ICT. There are new sectors where traditions of social dialogue have not really developed yet. But okay, as the labor market changes, so does society have to change, and you guys, if you are concerned about the exploitation of interns, you need to raise your voice with the company, with the municipality, with your national government, and hopefully the soft standards that the Commission is about to put forward, and then hopefully the EU ministers of employment are going to agree upon in a few months' time. Hopefully this can help your case. Unfortunately, we might all wish that there will be a lot stricter regulatory framework on traineeships, but it's not going to happen because the business would fiercely oppose this. So the reality is that we all need to kind of work together, unions, young people, businesses, governments, to try to improve the opportunities for young people, prevent exploitation, also explain to companies that it's not in their self-interest to exploit people and that they should try to play a more constructive role. And hopefully we can move forward like that.
One quick sentence for that, actually. Actually, it is not an issue for governments as well. Governments are using that as well. There are unpaid internships, plenty of that in governments themselves. So if you are saying we should address governments, they are part of the problem. They are not willing to be the solution because actually they benefit themselves. So it's really deeply entrenched. Yeah, we can talk about Germany, we can talk about the UN representations, we can talk about parts of the EU representations. So when you're saying, yeah, we just should address them and it will go away, that's probably not going to happen because the bureaucracy itself has no incentive.
May I ask Mr. Paisley to respond and to close with why? I mean, it's why this is still the best measure.
No, I think my response will be very short. I think, to conclude, that having a quality framework for traineeships, although in the form of a soft standard council recommendation, is better than having no quality framework for traineeship at the EU level at all. Okay, so it will help. It will help a bit. It's a small step. If the governments are abusing young people also, and if they are kind of perpetuating the nasty character of the labor market that exists for young people need to make their voice heard. Go on the street if necessary. You guys need to really make your voice heard. Team up with the unions, fight partners, question or really your members of parliament so that they put pressure on the government. You really need to stand for your interest because otherwise nothing happens.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, may I have a hand for the third motion to get all the way to the fourth and last colleague, Anna Valkyrie. Thank you.
All right, and I think this spot is way better than the other spot as well, so I'm going to stand here as well. Now the fourth motion, I think, is the most fun motion, or at least anyone who's been on an Erasmus program probably will enjoy it, will have enjoyed it. And this is exactly what we kind of want to point at with this motion as well. Just like the Italians and the Greeks and the Spanish did in the early times of the European Union, for the Greeks and the Spaniards when they joined, lots of them temporarily moved to other countries in Europe, worked there, filled up gaps that we had in Northern Europe, and when their economies started working better, or when they just got fed up with our food, they moved back and went to enjoy the better development of their own countries. Now, this is a moment for the motion.
Therefore, we all want the government or the European Union to take action. Jonas doesn't want to live in a tunnel. Davy doesn't want to live in a box. I don't want to live in a hut. So please, European Union, take action now.
Now.
Now. All right, and I would like to ask Yvonne to give us some more perspective, or a different perspective than the Erasmus people.
Well, I don't know. Well, if I read the motion, but to me it's not the most urgent solution and the most urgent priority of the youth guarantee, but it is a very good idea for a certain category of young people. When last year we had Debated Europe, a similar problem, but then for secondary school children, of young people, and we interviewed a few of them about how do you perceive Europe. And most of the young people we interviewed were from the gymnasia, so the higher level, and they all of them very enthusiastic. Oh, Europe is my country, I want to study in Europe, I want to travel in Europe. So yes, I believe Erasmus and all these kinds of arrangements are beautiful and very important, especially because I think the next generation will maybe make more true from European Union than what is it now. I think these kinds of exchanges and that you work all across Europe, I think that would be wonderful. I really believe in that. But, and that's my second layer of my reaction, I think it has also threats. And especially threats for those young people who don't have these easy opportunities. So if we do this, I think it's very important that we first of all listen to, and it's a very open door, but that we listen to this group. And again, I talk about the ones who are living in the ghettos, the very unemployed, poor young people in Portugal, in Greece, in Paris, etc. I'm not sure whether they're so happy with those arrangements. In the first place, because they don't even culturally are bounded to or have the idea about these kind of projects, because they are culturally more focused on the families. They want to be with their families, etc. So I think for this reason, I think it's very important to know this group better than up to this moment the EU does, I think. I sometimes have strongly the belief. Secondly, it can also be perceived as like, okay, you have to go out of our country. And if I talk about unemployment, I think there's research in the UK. 50% of the young people who are unemployed are from different migrant backgrounds, mainly black people. So if you have something like, yeah, you have to go out of the country, it's beautiful, they feel like, okay, I have to go out of my country. Could be a perception of it. But I think also, and that's the third layer of threat, that indeed, I think in Portugal, Greece, they would love to come to the Netherlands or like water, they will come to the places where they believe there is still work. But if you talk about lower educational jobs, there is not so much work in the Netherlands as well. So there will be accumulation of unemployed young people from different areas of Europe. So I think these threats are very, for me, are more heavier and more stronger, because I believe that you, like people like you will find your way, and I should stimulate it definitely, and I hope the EU is continuing with that. But I believe that differentiation in this youth guarantee program, with a very strong emphasis on those who are in need, and not only in the countries but also in the regions and sub-regions, is really important. And I really believe that the EU, and you said, yeah, let your voice hear, but I believe that youth participation is there across Europe. I don't think we have a lack of it. But we have lack in Europe in the institutions. They need to change. They need to adapt to the demographic changes which we're going through in multicultural demography in Europe. And I believe that skills and of the policymakers needs to be increased to listen better to those who are in need, and really listening long term, and then giving due weight to their needs. That's actually how I look into it. So sorry for this longer time, but I hope I opened the discussion.
Right, so the young people, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, are not going to be benefiting and might actually be starting to compete more heavily against each other, and that would probably not be a good thing. If I'm summarizing very quickly indeed. Sophia, I wanted to start.
Hi, I'm Sofia, and I'm going to talk from my knowledge of Portugal and probably some other countries with a high rate of unemployment. But I'm going to say that we are not that willing to move away from our country. In fact, our Prime Minister said to us that if we wanted some progress in life, we should go away. And we made like this revolution against that statement, because we want to help Portugal to get better. We want to stay in Portugal, and we want to help the economy, and we want to help us socially. And furthermore, we have this culture that is rather different from the northern countries. That's like, we really value our tradition and our family, and we like to experience and to travel, but most of us really don't want to go away from our parents and our family and our friends. We are really cozy people, and and so I don't think that we should focus on stimulate the youth to look for work out of borders, but yes, to stimulate their economy and their jobs in borders in these countries, because it would only benefit the youth, the society, and the country as a whole in their economical and social way. And yeah, that's right.
All right. Stefan?
Yeah, I actually beg to differ, because I don't think it's about the people who want to stay in their country so desperately. Those people won't just move out if they get a financial benefit or stimulus. The same, it's not about the people who already migrate, because if they get a stimulus, well, they will migrate as well. They probably won't make a change. But I think there's a group of people who is just cut off from the chance to go to another country, because this would mean like a big investment. It would mean, going away from a family. And even if there are no chances in the local community, those people very often just don't have the chance, because the family says, well, no, this you're gonna cost us a hell lot of money, and in the end you won't be able to send anything back. We just lose you, right? And I think, talking about this very specific interest group, it would be actually a very good policy to open up the borders for them as well, because in the end, let's be fair, in many areas there is not a lot of educational opportunities, not a lot of job opportunities. When they go abroad, it means, first of all, that they get the chance to learn another language in many cases in Europe, that they show on their CV that they are flexible and happy to move around, which is a good predisposition for almost any company that is like multinational. And thirdly, they also show that they are able to adapt to another culture, which is in a very multinational Europe probably a big advantage. They might even acquire a new skill set if they go to a country where they get a new job set that is not available in their local community. And I don't think that this very special interest group should be cut off from these very vital benefits for them and stay unemployed. Instead, the EU should focus on giving them a stimulus and the chance to move to other countries.
Lastly, Krista?
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be sort of that economist and bring like a boring economics perspective on this. Because I think that the issue of labor migration, labor mobility goes kind of beyond the issue of youth unemployment and poses a more like fundamental question. Because essentially, if we're going to keep like a current level of economic integration and specifically keep things like a common currency, I believe we're going to have to use like the common tool to handle economic imbalances that we use in other currency areas, which is large-scale migration. If you look at sort of areas around in all kinds of countries, we have seen this. And if I use an anecdotal example, my dad grew up like in an industrial town in northern Sweden. And when he was a kid, that was a pretty vibrant town. Lots of people lived there. They worked in large Swedish export companies and so on. But today, that's a bit of a ghost town, which is a pattern all across northern Sweden and across like areas of West Virginia and the US or northern England and so on, where lots and lots of people have moved out of there because those are poor areas, because worse economic conditions and so on. And that's probably something I believe we're going to have to see within sort of the Eurozone as well. It's probably unsustainable to have large areas that are on the lower economic level for so long. And what we're seeing as a sort of beginning trend now is that lots of people are moving out of places like Greece and moving to other parts of Europe. And the question that then poses is that it seems, for example, that Sofia is not necessarily happy with this. Right? You could say that if you want the EU to become a pan-European nation, that's not really a problem. People can live wherever. But if people actually do care about their country, if they think that there's some benefit in Portuguese people actually having jobs and benefiting the Portuguese community that they live in, then that is a bit of a problem. I think so. Essentially, that choice is a choice we're going to have to face, regardless of how the youth unemployment in the long term, and it poses kind of a broader question about which direction we want to take Europe in. So that's the point I want to make.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who wants to add another point to this? Johan?
Yes. I'd just like to say that I agree on one level with Gustav and the previous speakers, but I think you have to identify what kind of problem you want to solve. Because the problem is that we have a dearth of programmers in Stockholm, and we have a surplus of programmers in Greece, and then we should stimulate it by allowing them to move there. But the problem is we have a lot of youths who are unemployed all over Europe, because they basically, if there's a skills mismatch that is the same in most of Europe, or if it's because of a lack of jobs in general in all of Europe, then it isn't that the jobs are magically in a different part of town, or that if just the unemployed Greeks move to Germany and the unemployed Germans move to Greece, then everything would work out. And then instead you'll focus on trying to move the people who can get jobs. And those are the people that Yvonne was speaking of, the people who are already privileged, who already might be able to get jobs in their local areas, but they can get better ones in, for example, if they're in Greece, for example, in Northern Europe or something like that. And it's fine with helping them, but the question is that the main focus? Which also leads to other aspects that Sophia brought up, of brain drain, in the sense that these people will then move there to get those jobs that are better, but won't have the possibility of building up their own communities. And the question is, where should we put our focus? Is it in allowing them to transfer, or is it on focus on regional development?
All right.
Yeah, I will set aside with them, because I personally am very mobile. I have lived in several countries, but I have also seen the experience of people who didn't want to move and they had to move, and that's not an easy thing. And if you stimulate youth to look for work beyond national borders, it should be done with a lot of preparation in advance. It should be done with being an option and not the only option, because if it's the only option and then you arrive to a country with a different culture, with a different society, you are alone, it's very, very hard. So it should be, for some people, the last option, and actually it is the last option, and when they move, it's because they don't have any other option, and that doesn't help. So either you prepare them very well in advance when you go, and then I don't know if in the youth guarantees is this preparation included, but I don't think so. Or you should not stimulate people to do something that they don't want to do, because in the end that will cause a lot of frustration, and all the benefits of studying or living abroad will not be there in the end, because when they finish their kind of job they will try to come back as soon as possible, and then maybe they will not bring the best European feeling or the best experience from there.
All right, Yvonne, do you want to respond now, or do you want to?
No,
take
I can.
All right.
Maybe after you.
Well, some very good points that you have all made. Particularly the point on the Eurozone and the linking the issue of labour mobility with the dynamics of in the common currency area. And I think you were referring there to the volunteer optimum currency areas. And what does it make? What does a group of countries need if they want to have a common currency? The theory has been teaching us that they would need a high level of labour mobility, or at least they would need to have synchronized economic shocks, so that the same interest rate kind of really fits them all. And if they don't have that, they should have common budget in order to smooth the differences. And when one country is here, one country is here, and the common interest rate is here, it doesn't really work. You would need to really have some fiscal transfers between countries in order to reduce the imbalances. And this has of course been a very big taboo at the European Union level for a long time when the monetary union has been designed and reformed. So the issue of many people say that you can just rely on labor mobility. People will move from the struggling countries somewhere else, and it's going to all work fine, and you reduce unemployment. This is a very simplified and rosy view of things. People often tend to forget that in the US, which is also a very diverse country, with 50 states having a single currency, they also have a big federal budget to the tune of 20% GDP. But okay, this is already a much different debate. What I would like to stress is that in the EU, labor mobility, free movement of workers, is a right. Okay, so it's something that if you want to move, and you have the right to do so. So a Portuguese person does have the right to move to the UK or to Italy or to Romania or wherever to find a job and to work there. But it should not be forced. It should not be forced politically. It shouldn't be forced economically. And maybe let me quote you. Let me quote you from the Youth Guarantee recommendation again. Paragraph 18. Member states should promote labor mobility, so not to force, not stimulate. Promote labor mobility by making young people aware of job offers, traineeships and apprenticeships, and available support in different areas and regions and countries. For example, through services and schemes which encourage the people to move and work within the union, so all cross-border possibilities. Ensure that adequate support is available to help young people who find work in another area or another member state, so that you help them adapt to their new work environment. The EU, so it's all about, I think, the group that you were talking about, not those who really want to stay or those who have already moved, but really helping those who would like to move, who would be willing to move, but maybe don't have even the means to travel for an interview. Maybe those who would need to do a language course in order to take up a job opportunity in another member state. Support is, of course, promotion of labor mobility as a right, and it's something that people voluntarily like to do. This is very important. The EU has been promoting it through the various parts of the Erasmus program, student mobility, but also mobility in not only in universities but also in vocational education. But we also have the project which is called the Your First EURES Job, and it's basically a scheme which helps place people into a different country than where they are based to take up the first job. It's a very small scheme, but it can be potentially scaled up. And I think this is the kind of support that maybe we are looking for.
So the conclusion is that there are measures available. We shouldn't focus on any more measures because they might be forcing people, or that we should only focus on those that promote rather than convince people to actually move abroad, which is almost more what we're talking about, I think. Gustav?
Yeah, so exactly on that, I think that one problem is that the bravery mechanism you already mentioned is exactly the fact that if you create some kind of incentives that makes people who are sort of, like you talked about, like the Erasmus type of people, make them want to move, that most of them probably will, in the long run, move out of areas that are hit very hard by economic problems, because they can move fairly easily, they speak language, have education, and so on. And the point is, once they've moved out of an area, the people who are left will have very little opportunity left in their area, and they might then eventually feel forced or coerced to move simply by the economic condition. So even if we're not very actively forcing people who wouldn't want to move, if at the point where we create a possibility for everyone with sort of good skills and higher education to move, usually if you look at kind of the countries, Herzegovina and Sweden, I mean, people with university education tend to not stay those. Then people get stuck, and then other people have to move and take low-wage jobs in the cities and so on. So it can be sort of problematic.
Great. So do you want to respond to that? And I think then we need to move to conclusions already, right? Yes. Yeah. All right. So first,
it's a bit of a closing point in a way. I know my job. No, but I can be only enthusiastic when I listen to the words of Mrs. Hesselman.
Wow, you have started your...
In the way that our generation is truly the Erasmus generation. One of the mottos of my association is, some call it Europe, we call it home. And it goes together in the same time of one of the objectives of the European Union, which is the fulfillment of the internal market. And I really enjoyed the last sentence of Lukáš saying that free movement of workers is a right, and I would add that of course it's not a duty, and it has been highlighted by many of you during this debate. What I would like to answer just to Johan about the job vacancies. Okay, youth mobility is possibly not the miracle solution, but 60% of the job vacancies are not published. So it means that there are much more job vacancies that nobody knows existing than actually you're applying to the jobs. And just one last thing about the comment made by Sofia. I'm not from southern Europe countries, but I'm French, and I hope that I'm rather cozy, and I hope that you can consider that I like my family while being European.
We sort this out later, you know.
Yes, well, to actually add on to just to put in to many of the young representatives suggested the idea of a youth job bank to have to stimulate, to solve the problem partly through stimulating that open market. But the other question, and it's not one that you have to answer for yourself, but the other question is, you may not be willing to move away, but do you think European people in general are ready to welcome each other from other countries into their own communities when there might be a work shortage? And that's where you come back to the regional and international.
Yeah, so in line with that, just spontaneous reflection on what I've heard, I think we should avoid that the European Union becomes an elite process in which more and more the gap which is already there, I think you all read about it, between those who are more disadvantaged and those in power is widening. And therefore I liked there in that corner some remarks, so what problem to solve? And I think we have to really differentiate and make the spectrum as broad as the youths are actually in terms of categories. So I think that's very important, what I learned now from the discussion and before. Secondly, it are the rights, and everybody has the rights, but I think also I heard the needs. What are the needs? The needs of the people. So again I come to this differentiation, and there is also the problem hide in the needs. So I think, and then my last word again is, and that's also why we as ID exist, is actually that I really believe in debate, not only because of that you become good policymakers, etc., but also because it gives a structure to really exchange with those who are in need and who really would like to open up their voices. And so my last point is, again, talking about the EU, we're talking about all the people, and I think the people are in the center, and I really would like to stimulate the EU to develop more visible than it is right now, good policies for those who don't feel included in the EU. And that's just, without saying that I don't like the Erasmus program, I love it, but I think this is the back of this remark.
Right, with that, I think we have concluded this fourth motion of this afternoon. It almost feels like evening. With that, I think we've also closed the debate. I would like to give a short round of applause for all the speakers, for you as well.